Okay, hi everyone. My name is Colin Philp from the British Interplanetary Society. I'm the president of the organisation, and I'm going to do a talk about art, culture, and space with science fiction as part of the story. So, just to begin, how many people here have heard of the British Interplanetary Society? A few hands going up. How many people haven't heard of the British Interplanetary Society? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Right. Well, I'll be saying a few words about the society and what we do. Okay. So I'm actually doing this talk. I'm standing in for Mark Stewart, who is the editor of our Odyssey magazine. We actually have 4 magazines within the society that cover all aspects of astronautics and space exploration. Odyssey is our science fiction, art and culture magazine. So, from imagination to reality, which is the motto of the British Interplanetary Society. So it's the impact of media and culture on space exploration and on our daily lives. So Odyssey magazine, as I just mentioned, has its origins in the imagination side of the BS motto. And we recently did an interview with Helen Sharman in our July and September issues. And there are 2 images associated with that. So that's the cover of our magazine there. So the overlap of fact and fiction is where Odyssey has its deepest roots, and we explore different cultural aspects in each issue of the magazine. In the past, we've interviewed some of the biggest names in space in science fiction, including Kim Stanley Robinson and Richard Morgan. And there's always been a willingness for creatives such as writers and artists to engage with space culture. This is a tradition we encourage and support at the BIS. Culture has had a huge impact on spaceflight and space exploration, dating back to the novels of H.G. Wells and Jules Verne. Thanks to science fiction, explorers were leaving footprints on the moon long before the Apollo astronauts got there. For example, Bedford and Cavor in First Men in the Moon. So this is Arthur C. Clarke, one of our early members. Have any people here heard of Arthur C. Clarke? Surely most people have heard of Arthur C. Clarke. Okay. Yeah, very famous science fiction writer. He says that he thinks that the British Interplanetary Society is run, and always has been run, by visionaries, poets, if you like, who happen to be scientists. Sometimes the disguise isn't very good. Arthur's observation is as true today as it was almost 50 years ago when he first made it. There are poets amongst the members of the BIS, visionaries, writers, futurists, along with scientists, engineers, students, technicians, and astronomers. In fact, the BIS is home to anyone with an interest in space. And in our 4 publications, Spaceflight, Space Chronicle, JBIS, and Odyssey, we are still writing that prelude to space that Arthur began in 1947. Contributing to an ongoing story of space exploration in both fact and fiction as we pursue our society's motto, from imagination to reality. Past alumni include Sir Patrick Moore, current notable members Helen Sharman, Tim Peake, and best-selling author Stephen Baxter. So is the purpose of space art and speculative fiction to show us destinations we may never reach in reality, or to afford us a glimpse of the future? So that could be a debate that we could go into. So did Chesley Bonestell, who was a very famous space artist, his wheeled space station prefigure the iconic design that later appeared in 2001: A Space Odyssey? Did Clarke and Kubrick see Chesley's paintings in magazines such as Collier's and Galaxy, or the special effects he contributed to in Destination Moon and When Worlds Collide? Current BIS members include artists and designers such as David A. Hardy, Steve Salmon, and Jackie Burns, president of the IAAA. What I'm going to do here is show you a few items of space art from Ralph Smith, who was a chairman of the BIS. He was also an architectural engineer and an artist, a very good draftsman. And he was one of the early pioneers in visualizing what space travel could look like. So really, this is space travel from the point of view of the 1940s. So you see here colour-coded spacesuits. The lunar lander design there was the first viable design for a lunar landing vehicle, actually a spacecraft to leave the Earth's atmosphere. And notice that the landing gear design there is very similar to the Apollo lunar module. So NASA acknowledged the depth to the BIS for that concept. Here we see an example of an early lunar base with inflatable habitats there. Also an inflatable antenna for communication with Earth. You see the lunar lander there. And also a sled for transporting items across the surface in 16G, actually quite a good way of doing it. This is retrieving supplies in a dropping area. This one has made a poor landing. So a salvage vehicle there uses a turbine motor using the same propellants used in the fuel pumps of the spaceships that brought them to the moon. Here we see a visualization of a lunar operation with 2 BIS lunar spaceships and a filmmaker. I don't know whether this spaceship is actually lifting off or landing, but it looks pretty spectacular. But notice the pre-Apollo jagged mountains there, which kind of disappeared once we knew what the lunar surface actually looked like. This is assembling a space station in orbit. Notice that you have lots of kind of free orbiting objects here, which each have their own orbits, which means they're either going to float apart or collide with each other at some point. So the concept we have nowadays is actually giant frameworks to which items to be assembled would be fixed. But it was a good early concept here. And I think this was revolutionary because at the time, very few people could actually even visualize what space exploration would look like. And Ralph Smith was one of the people that enabled that to happen. And it was quite revolutionary at the time. And this is Arthur C. Clarke's vision for a communication satellite, a giant dish in orbit with a space station attached with, I think, around a dozen astronauts in it just to service this huge antenna. And it's got a rotating aspect to it as well to recreate gravity. So this was a concept from 1945. This is re-entry in a winged space vehicle. See the plasma glow through the porthole there, the window. So this is a kind of early space shuttle concept. And then that vehicle landing on Mars. And this is the pre-Viking visualization of Mars with a blue sky. And this one I really like, a lunar gymnasium in 1/6 gravity. So you can do some pretty incredible things. You know, a good athlete would be able to leap 10 meters into the air. So I'm thinking one day maybe the Olympics on the moon would be fantastic. Samantha Harvey won last year's Booker Prize with her short novel Orbital. Is it science fiction or a space pastoral? In the end, do such labels matter? It was a book that allowed readers to travel into space and to view our planet from orbit, an experience many of us will never have in real life. It was in many ways a spaceship of the mind, offering through culture and imagination a chance to undertake a remarkable journey. The future now. J.G. Ballard once said that the space age was over because we all now live in a science fictional age where personal computers are commonplace in multiple guises and where everyone carries a Star Trek communicator in the form of their personal phone. Futuristic images are everywhere in movies, books, and on our screens. And it's sometimes difficult to tell where the boundary line is between fact and fiction when the crew of the latest SpaceX mission look as if they have just walked off the set of Interstellar or Ad Astra. Indeed, it was Ballard who contended that we all now live in a fictional age in which all our internal landscapes, our dreams, hopes, and wishes have now been externalized by the media into an everyday collective reality. So as part of the BIS's cultural engagement, we run the Sir Arthur Clarke Awards, which recognise and reward individuals and teams that have made a notable contribution or outstanding achievements in space activities in the UK, known as the Arthurs. And we have our 3-day Reinventing Space conference next week at the Royal Aeronautical Society. It's 27th to 29th of October. We also have a Space Careers Day as part of that event. So the British Interplanetary Society has been the launch site for many spaceships of the mind, the starting point for numerous voyages of exploration out into deep space. To this day, it remains the birthplace of ideas and concepts that seem almost borrowed from the future. It's the spiritual home of a generation which still believes in President Kennedy's assertion made back in 1961 that space achievement may hold the key to our future on Earth, and of a new generation now pinning its hope on the commercialization of space, on opening up the high frontier for all. It is, in short, the place to go if you can't take your eyes off the stars. The BIS came up with working designs for lunar landers and habitats in space decades before such ideas became a reality. The Society crossed the finishing line in the race to devise many visionary concepts, and few ever noticed, like Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier. It was almost done in secret, away from the public view, hidden from the gaze of a populace that might not have believed such things were possible. Look closely at the history of this rocket society, the only one still in its original form, and you will see remarkable heritage that stretches from the 1930s all the way to modern endeavours such as Project Daedalus, which drew up blueprints for nothing less than a working starship. In the post-war years, after Wernher von Braun had made the long-range ballistic potential of the rocket an all too terrifying reality for many Londoners, the BIS played a pivotal role in altering the climate of public opinion, making the advocacy of spaceflight respectable by providing an authoritative source of information on the coming space age. It was the voice of a society unafraid to champion radical concepts. In a very real sense, anyone who belongs to the BIS is a stargazer. It's impossible to plan journeys into space, conceptual or otherwise, without peering deep into the heavens, without studying the target destination with all the dedication and precision that only an astronomer can bring to bear. Such ground-based celestial navigation was at the heart of the effort that is still perhaps the Society's most famous undertaking, Project Daedalus, a theoretical design study that set out the requirements for sending a spacecraft to Barnard Star, a red dwarf star 6 light years from Earth. It was all done back in the 1970s by a team who belonged more rightly to a future age. Daedalus typifies what the BIS does best in providing a home, a meeting point for those undaunted by the challenge of the stars. The Society's focus on translating imagination to reality is what sets it apart, concentrating the collective talents of its diverse membership on some of the hardest problems in space engineering and technology. The BIS think tank is essentially a magnifying glass held over the hidden minutiae of future possibilities. As an aspiration, it might seem like trying to catch the wind, were it not for the Society's proven history that includes detailed concepts and artistic designs, not just for Daedalus, but for a moonship, a lunar rover, a lunar monorail, and mechanics of orbital rendezvous, and a functioning spacesuit. As well as laying the groundwork for the exploration of the moon, years before NASA got there, the BIS has also left virtual footprints on Mars in the shape of Project Boreas, conducted between 2003 and 2006, which mapped out the requirements for setting up a research base at the planet's North Pole. Figures tower over the history of the BIS, both of whom were early members of the Society. Does anyone recognise the two figures we have in the picture here? We have, on the right, we have Sir Patrick Moore, one of the probably the most famous astronomer that most people know. To the left, anyone know the person to the left? Brian May, yes, that's it, yeah. Yeah, very famous, obviously being part of Queen, rock guitarist, but also now an astrophysicist, I believe. So yes, he is a space cadet like the rest of us. Arthur C. Clarke was described as, by the New Yorker, as one of the most truly prophetic figures of the space age, the colossus of science fiction. And both Patrick and Arthur met through the very society that they did so much to inspire and encourage them. Patrick often recounted his initial meeting with the man who would go on to invent the concept of the geosynchronous satellite. He said, "The BIS was founded in 1933. I joined in 1952. Arthur Clark was also a member, and he came up to me and shook my hand at the first meeting, and we struck up an immediate friendship that lasted the rest of our lives. Patrick was also, of course, as much a cultural figure as a well-known popularizer of astronomy and science. Between them, Arthur and Patrick produced enough best-selling books to fill a library, quite literally in the case of the BIS library, big books which are still being read today. Before he died, Patrick often hosted summer picnics for society members at his delightful home in Chelsea, demonstrating just how generous and unassuming this great astronomer was. Arthur set the agenda for the literary exploration space as long ago as the 1950s in books such as Interplanetary Flight in 1950 and The Exploration of Space in 1951, as well as mapping out a way to the planets and the stars in his award-winning fiction. The BIS headquarters is named after Arthur, who joined the Society at the age of 16 and supported it throughout his life. His portrait greets visitors on their arrival. The inscription reads, "To the British Interplanetary Society with all good wishes, Arthur C. Clarke." Arthur was an honorary fellow of the BIS, a rare accolade bestowed on only a handful of members, and chairman of the BIS between 1947 and 1950, and again in 1953. And his earliest known non-fiction appeared in the Society's journal in the 1940s and 50s. He was also a generous financial benefactor to the Society. So the BIS welcomes everyone from space cadets to science fiction fans, from aerospace and science students to those working professionally in the space industry, academics and media figures, or anyone with an enthusiasm for space travel. Members gain access to events and talks, as well as gaining access to the Society's 4 amazing publications: Spaceflight, which is a monthly astronautics current affairs journal, scientific journal, peer-reviewed papers, the Journal of the BIS, and our history periodical, Space Chronicle, and of course our arts and culture magazine, Odyssey. There will always be a corner of southwest London, close by Vauxhall Station, which welcomes would-be space travellers and stargazers of all descriptions and of all ages. If you haven't been there yet, come and visit a society in which the excitement of spaceflight never really fades. All are welcome. And just the last things, we do have a special offer for under 25s of free membership of the Society. So you get these benefits: access and discounts to selected events, networking opportunities, projects and workshops you can get involved with, or even start your own technical project, publishing our technical publications, and create the future of space. Thank you.